Wu was having the worst Tuesday of his life, and he had experienced some truly terrible Tuesdays before. There was the Tuesday when his apartment flooded, the Tuesday when his ex-girlfriend married his cousin, the Tuesday when he accidentally sent a complaint about his boss to his boss. But this Tuesday was special. This Tuesday, he was probably going to die in space. The cargo ship drifted silently through the black void between stars. It was not a beautiful ship. It was old, patched in dozens of places, and made strange noises that the crew had learned to ignore. But it was home to 12 people who moved goods between Earth colonies and alien trading posts. Simple work, honest work, usually boring work. Wu sat in the engine room, his hands covered in grease, when the first alarm started screaming. Navigation failure, the ship's computer announced in its calm, almost bored voice. Course correction required. He wiped his hands and walked to the nearest display screen. The map showed their position drifting slowly but steadily toward a region marked in red. The red zone had a simple label, sovereign space. Do not enter. Well, Wu said to no one in particular, that's not good. They were not friends of humanity. They were not enemies either, not officially. The word diplomats used was tense. The Empire controlled over 100 star systems. They were tall, strong, lived for centuries, and believed themselves to be the superior species in the galaxy. Humans were new to space travel, small, weak, and short-lived. They looked at humans the way humans might look at ants building a tiny hill near a highway. By the time the engineering team fixed the navigation system, it was too late. They had crossed the invisible line into territory. Captain tried to send messages explaining the accident. She tried to turn the ship around. She tried everything a good captain could try. None of it mattered. Within an hour, 6 warships surrounded them. Each warship was the size of a small city. They looked like a toy beside them. Cargo vessel, a cold voice came through the communication system. You have violated the sovereign space of the Empire. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in immediate destruction. Captain powered down the engines. The boarding party arrived 20 minutes later. The airlock opened, and Wu got his first close look at soldiers. They were impressive in the worst possible way. Each one stood over 7 feet tall. Their skin was deep purple, almost black, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They had 2 arms like humans, but their hands had 6 fingers each, and their eyes were solid gold without any visible pupils. They wore armor that looked like it was grown rather than built, and they carried weapons that hummed with quiet energy. The crew of the stood in a line in the cargo bay, 12 humans facing 20 soldiers. The size difference was almost funny. Almost. An officer walked down the line of humans, looking at each one like a farmer inspecting vegetables at a market. He stopped in front of Old Park, the ship's cook. Park was 63 years old, kind, and made the best kimchi in 3 star systems. He was also clearly terrified, his hands shaking at his sides. This one is defective, the officer said. Too old, too weak. He shoved Park. The old man stumbled backward and fell hard against a cargo container. A small cut opened on his forehead, and blood began to run down his face. Something inside Wu moved before his brain could stop it. He stepped forward, placing himself between Park and the officer. The soldier was almost 2 feet taller than him. Wu had to look up to meet those golden eyes. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears, but his voice came out steady. Hey, Wu said, try someone your own size. The cargo bay went completely silent. The other crew members stared at him with wide eyes. Captain closed her eyes and whispered something that might have been a prayer. Even the soldiers seemed frozen, unable to process what had just happened. The officer looked down at Wu. His gold eyes showed no emotion. What did you say, human? Wu knew he should apologize. He knew he should bow, beg, do whatever it took to survive. But Park was still on the ground behind him, bleeding, and something stubborn in Wu's chest refused to bend. I said try someone your own size. Pushing old men around doesn't make you strong. It makes you a bully. The officer moved faster than Wu could follow. One moment he was standing there. The next moment, Wu was on his knees, energy restraints burning around his wrists, a weapon pressed against the back of his head. This human has committed aggression against the Empire, the officer announced. He will be taken for judgment. Li Min, the ship's medic and Wu's best friend, stepped forward. Wait, you can't just take him. He was defending an elderly crew member. The officer consulted a small device on his wrist. You are listed as this male's mate, his betrothed. Min hesitated only for a second. Yes, I am his. It was a lie, of course. They had listed themselves as engaged on the ship's records years ago because it made visa applications easier for certain ports. They had never actually been romantic. Min was like a sister to him, and he was like an annoying brother to her. But right now, that lie might be the only thing keeping her close enough to help. Then you may accompany the detained vessel to our processing station, the officer said. Your mate will be transported separately for judgment. They pulled Wu to his feet. As they dragged him toward the airlock, he managed to look back at his crew. At Captain, who looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. At Park, now being helped up by other crew members, tears in his old eyes. At Min, who gave him a look that clearly said, I will find a way to fix this, you absolute idiot. The airlock closed. The ship's interior was cold, dark, and smelled like metal and something else, something alive. They threw Wu into a cell barely large enough for him to lie down. The energy bars hummed with power that made his teeth ache. He sat in the darkness for a long time. He thought about his mother back on Earth, who still sent him messages every week asking when he would get a real job. He thought about the tiny apartment he rented on the orbital station near Mars, where his plants were probably dying right now because he forgot to set the automatic watering system. He thought about all the things he had planned to do with his life, the places he wanted to see, the foods he wanted to eat. Then he thought about Park falling, and he knew he would make the same choice again. Some things were more important than survival. Some things made survival worth having. The ship's engines hummed to life. Through a tiny window, Wu watched the grow smaller and smaller until it was just another dot among the stars. He was being taken to the... He had no idea what waited for him there, but whatever it was, he decided, he would face it standing up. It was still Tuesday. Somehow, that felt appropriate. The prison transport ship was called the Iron Promise, and it was designed to crush hope. Everything about it seemed built for that single purpose. The walls were black metal that seemed to swallow light. The air was kept cold enough to make human teeth chatter. The cells were small, the food was gray paste that tasted like nothing, and the silence was broken only by the heavy footsteps of guards making their rounds. Wu had been on the ship for 3 days now. At least he thought it was 3 days. It was hard to tell when there were no windows and the lights never changed. He had counted meals instead. 9 meals meant 3 days. Simple math for a simple situation. On the morning of the 4th day, or what he guessed was morning, a group of officers came to his cell. They were dressed differently from the soldiers on the boarding party. These wore formal uniforms with medals and ribbons, and they carried themselves with the stiff pride of bureaucrats everywhere. Human prisoner, one of them announced, you will now hear the official charges against you. Wu stood up. His back hurt from sleeping on the metal floor, and he was fairly certain he smelled terrible. But he stood straight and looked at them directly. The officer began reading from a glowing tablet. Charge 1, illegal entry into sovereign space. Charge 2, failure to immediately surrender upon detection. Charge 3, physical aggression against a military officer. Charge 4. The officer paused, looking at the screen with confusion. Charge 4, verbal insolence toward authority. Wu raised his hand like a student in a classroom. The officer stared at him. What are you doing? I have a question. Prisoners do not ask questions. Sure, but I'm asking anyway. That third charge, physical aggression. I stepped between someone and your officer. I never touched anyone. How is standing somewhere physical aggression? The officer's golden eyes narrowed. You positioned your body in opposition to a military action. That constitutes physical resistance. So standing is a crime now. It is when standing interferes with official business. Wu nodded slowly as if thinking this over carefully. Okay, and the fourth charge, verbal insolence. I notice you used the word toward in that sentence. Shouldn't it be against? Insolence against authority would be grammatically correct. Toward suggests direction of movement, which doesn't really work with an abstract concept like insolence. The cargo bay went very quiet. The other officers exchanged confused looks. They had processed thousands of prisoners from dozens of species over the years. No one had ever corrected their grammar before. Are you, the officer seemed to struggle for words, are you criticizing my speech? Not criticizing, just helping. Grammar is important. The officer's hands tightened on his tablet. Add charge 5, extended verbal insolence and disrespect toward authority. Against, Wu said. Verbal insolence against authority. Charge 6, continuing verbal insolence despite warning. Wu smiled. He probably should not have smiled, but something about the absurdity of the situation, about standing in a prison cell light years from home arguing about grammar with aliens who wanted to execute him, struck him as genuinely funny. Later that day, the guards came to move him to a different section of the ship. They put heavy restraints on his wrists and ankles, connected by a chain that forced him to walk in short, shuffling steps. 2 guards walked ahead of him, 2 behind. Apparently, correcting an officer's grammar made you a high-security risk. They walked through long corridors, passed through security checkpoints, and eventually entered a wider hallway with windows looking out into space. Wu slowed his shuffle, trying to catch a glimpse of the stars. Even now, even in chains, the view took his breath away. So many stars, so much universe. It made his problems feel very small. Then he heard the voices. High-pitched, excited voices speaking rapid. He turned a corner and found himself facing a group of about 20 children. They were smaller than the adults, obviously, standing only about 4 feet tall. Their skin was lighter purple, almost lavender, and their golden eyes were wider, rounder, full of curiosity. They wore matching uniforms that looked like school clothes. A tired-looking adult stood at the front of the group, clearly a teacher trying to maintain control. The children froze when they saw Wu. They stared at him with open fascination. He realized that for many of them, this might be their first time seeing a human in person. He probably looked strange to them. Small, pale, soft-skinned, with dark hair and round eyes that showed too much white. Children, move aside, one of the guards commanded. Prisoner transport. The children shuffled toward the walls, but they never stopped staring. Wu shuffled past them, chains clinking with each step. He could hear them whispering to each other. It's so small. Look at its skin, it's like raw dough. Does it bite? Then he heard something else, a small sound of distress. He looked down and saw a tiny girl, no more than 5 or 6 years old by human standards. She was standing near a ventilation grate in the floor, and she was crying. Her small hands reached toward the grate, fingers too big to fit through the narrow gaps. Wu stopped walking. The guards immediately tensed. Keep moving, prisoner. But Wu was looking at what the girl was reaching for. Through the grate, he could see a small toy. It looked like a stuffed animal of some kind, purple and fuzzy, with button eyes. It had fallen through the gaps and was sitting just out of reach on a ledge below. The girl looked up at him. Her golden eyes were wet with tears. She was afraid of him, he could tell, but she was also sad about her toy. Wu knelt down, his chains rattling against the floor. The guards shouted warnings. He ignored them. He stretched his arm through the bars of his restraint cage, reaching toward the grate. His human hands were smaller than hands. His fingers were thinner. He could fit them through the gaps where fingers could not. He reached down, touched soft fabric, and carefully lifted the toy up through the grate. The girl stared at him with wide eyes. Wu held out the stuffed animal. After a moment, she reached out with trembling hands and took it. She clutched it to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the universe. Wu smiled at her, a real smile, warm and gentle. "There you go," he said softly, "all better." The corridor was completely silent. The children stared. The teacher stared. Even the guards seemed frozen, their weapons half raised, uncertain what to do. Wu noticed a small drone floating near the ceiling. A recording drone, he realized, probably documenting the school trip. It was pointed directly at him. One of the guards grabbed him roughly and pulled him to his feet. "Move, prisoner, now." As they dragged him away, Wu looked back. The little girl was still watching him, the toy held tight in her arms. She raised one small hand and waved. He could not wave back with his hands chained, but he nodded at her, just a small nod, before the guards pushed him around a corner and out of sight. 3 hours later, the video had spread across every social network. Within 6 hours, it had been viewed over 2 billion times. The prisoner from the cargo ship, the human who had shown kindness to a child, the small, strange creature who had smiled while in chains. The public did not know what to make of it. Humans were supposed to be primitive, violent, barely evolved apes who had stumbled into space by accident. The Empire's propaganda had always portrayed them as dangerous, unpredictable, savage. This human in the video did not look savage. He looked kind. The case that had been a minor border violation was now the most talked about event in the Empire. Politicians demanded answers. Journalists demanded access. The public demanded to understand. The next morning, Wu was informed that his case had been escalated. He would no longer face a simple military tribunal. His crimes would be judged by the highest authority in the Empire. He would stand before the Queen herself. Wu received this news while eating his gray-paced breakfast. He chewed slowly, swallowed, and said, "Well, at least my week is getting more interesting." It was definitely not Tuesday anymore, but somehow things had gotten worse anyway. The throne room of the Empire was designed to make visitors feel small. It succeeded completely. Wu had never felt so tiny in his entire life. The ceiling rose so high above him that it disappeared into shadow. Pillars of black stone, each one carved with thousands of years of history, lined the walls like silent giants. Floating holographic displays showed maps of the Empire's territory, hundreds of star systems glowing like jewels against the darkness. The floor was polished so perfectly that Wu could see his own reflection looking back at him, a small and shabby figure in wrinkled clothes. And there were people, so many people. Hundreds of nobles filled the galleries on either side of the central aisle. They wore elaborate robes of deep purple and black, decorated with metals and gems that probably cost more than everything Wu had ever owned combined. They looked down at him with expressions of curiosity, disgust, and amusement. A human, in the throne room, how entertaining. Guards marched Wu down the central aisle. Energy chains bound his wrists in front of him, glowing faintly blue. His footsteps echoed in the vast space, each one sounding impossibly loud in the waiting silence. At the far end of the room sat the throne. It was made of living crystal, constantly shifting and changing color, responding somehow to the mood of its occupant. Right now, it glowed a deep, dangerous red. And on the throne sat Queen. Wu had seen pictures of her, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had seen pictures, but pictures did not prepare him for the reality. She was 8 feet tall even while sitting, with skin the color of deep twilight and 4 arms that rested on the throne's armrests with casual power. Her face was angular and sharp, beautiful in a way that was entirely alien, entirely dangerous. Her eyes were gold like all, but somehow brighter, deeper, like looking into twin suns. She wore a crown of floating crystal shards that orbited her head slowly, catching light and throwing rainbow patterns across her features. Her robes were simple compared to the nobles around her, just plain black fabric, but somehow that simplicity made her more impressive. She did not need decoration. She was enough. Wu had thought he was prepared for this. He was wrong. The guard stopped him about 30 feet from the throne and forced him to his knees. The stone floor was cold and hard. He kept his head up, looking at her, even though he knew that was against protocol. You were supposed to keep your eyes down in the presence of royalty. You were supposed to show submission. Wu had never been good at supposed to. So, Queen said. Her voice was deep and resonant, filling the entire throne room without effort. This is the human who has caused such disruption in my empire. A tall woman standing beside the throne stepped forward. She wore a military uniform covered in medals and carried herself with the exhausted patience of someone who had seen too much. This was Commander, the Queen's most trusted advisor. Your Majesty, Commander said, the prisoner is charged with illegal border crossing, resisting arrest, physical aggression against military personnel, and multiple counts of verbal insolence. He is also the subject of the viral recording that has disrupted public opinion throughout the empire. I have seen the recording, the Queen said. The child and the toy. Yes, Your Majesty. Interesting. His golden eyes fixed on Wu. Human, you have heard the charges against you. How do you plead? The throne room fell silent. Every noble, every guard, every servant waited for his answer. He was supposed to grovel. He was supposed to beg for mercy, to claim it was all a misunderstanding, to prostrate himself before her power. Wu took a slow breath. Guilty, he said clearly. I am guilty of protecting an old man from being hurt. I am not guilty of anything worth your time, Your Majesty. The gasp that went through the crowd was like a wave. Nobles clutched their chests. Guards tightened their grips on weapons. Commander closed her eyes briefly, as if praying for patience. Queen did not gasp. She did not react at all for a long moment. She simply looked at him, her golden eyes unblinking, her expression unreadable. Then she stood up. The throne room went absolutely silent. The Queen never stood during judgment. Never. In 300 years of her rule, she had never once left her throne to approach a prisoner. Wu watched as she descended the steps slowly, her 4 arms folded behind her back, her robes trailing behind her like shadow given form. She circled him. He stayed on his knees but kept his head up, following her with his eyes as much as he could. She was so tall that when she stood directly in front of him, all he could see was the hem of her robe. You do not lower your eyes, she observed. I have nothing to be ashamed of. You do not beg. Would it help? No. Then why waste both our time? She completed her circle and stopped in front of him again. This time, she knelt down, bringing her face level with his. Up close, he could see details he had missed before. Fine lines of silver traced patterns across her violet skin. Her eyes had flecks of copper mixed with the gold. She smelled like something he could not identify, something that reminded him of thunderstorms and mountain air. You are very small, she said. I'm actually considered average height on Earth. Your species lives, 80 years if fortunate? Give or take. We live 800, perhaps more. She tilted her head, studying him like a scientist examining a strange insect. Your bodies are fragile. Your strength is limited. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no advantages that any sensible evolution would provide. We have thumbs. We have thumbs as well, better ones, more of them. Wu shrugged as best he could in chains. Then I guess we just have stubbornness. Began to circle him again, speaking as she walked. This was the discipline, he realized. A formal ritual where the Queen would verbally break a prisoner before passing judgment. She would list their failures, their weaknesses, their worthlessness, until they collapsed into sobbing apologies. Humans achieved space travel barely 2 centuries ago, she said. We have sailed the stars for 12,000 years. Your technology is primitive. Your understanding of physics is elementary. Your art is childish. Your music is noise. Your literature is the scratching of confused children. She paused, waiting for a response. Wu thought for a moment. Our music is pretty good, actually. Have you heard jazz? Another ripple went through the crowd. No one talked back during the discipline. It simply was not done. Continued, her voice growing sharper. Your species fights constant wars among yourselves. You destroy your own planets. You cannot even agree on basic governance. You are chaotic, irrational, driven by emotions you cannot control. That's fair, Wu admitted. We're a work in progress. A work in progress. She stopped in front of him again. That is how you describe humanity's failures, a work in progress. How else would I describe them? We're young, we make mistakes, we learn, we get better. That's what progress means. And the wars, the destruction, the suffering you inflict on each other. Wu met her eyes. We're working on that too. We're not perfect. We know we're not perfect, but we keep trying. That has to count for something. Was silent for a long moment. Her golden eyes searched his face, looking for something. Fear, maybe. Submission. The crack in his armor that she could exploit to break him. She did not find it. You showed kindness to that child, she said quietly. Why? The question caught him off guard. Of all the things he expected her to ask, this was not it. She was crying, he said simply. Her toy fell, I could reach it. Why wouldn't I help? You were in chains, a prisoner, surrounded by guards who would kill you for any wrong movement, and you stopped to help a child who is a member of the species that imprisoned you. She was still a kid. Kids deserve kindness. All kids everywhere from any species. That's not complicated. Stood very still. The throne room waited. The crystal crown above her head slowed its rotation, the colors shifting from deep red to something softer, something almost violet. You are strange, Wu, she said finally. Very strange indeed. She turned and walked back toward her throne. Wu watched her go, still not sure if he was about to be executed or released or something else entirely. She sat down. The crystal throne shifted around her, accepting her weight, glowing with colors he could not name. The discipline continues tomorrow, she announced. The prisoner will be held in the palace cells. This session is concluded. And with that, she rose and left through a door behind the throne, her robes sweeping the floor, leaving behind a room full of confused nobles and one very confused human still kneeling on the cold stone floor. Commander approached him as the guards came to take him away. You should have begged, she said quietly. Everyone begs. Wu looked up at her. Would it have helped? The commander hesitated. No, but it would have been normal. I've never been very good at normal. She almost smiled. Almost. Then the guards pulled him to his feet and led him away to the palace cells, where he would spend the night wondering what tomorrow would bring. Whatever it was, he decided, he would face it standing up. The palace cells were nicer than the prison transport cells. This was not saying much, since the prison transport cells had been about as comfortable as a metal box, which is exactly what they were. But the palace cells had beds with actual mattresses, windows that showed the alien sky, and food that had colors other than gray. Wu spent the night staring out the window. That was beautiful, he had to admit. 3 moons hung in the sky, each a different size, casting silver light over a city that seemed to grow up out of the ground like a forest of spires and domes. Ships moved between buildings like fish swimming through water. Lights twinkled in patterns he did not understand. He wondered what Min was doing. Was she still on the ship? Had they released her? Was she eating better food than him? Knowing Min, she had probably already charmed her guards and was gathering information about how to rescue him. She was good at that. She was good at most things. Morning came, announced by a change in the light outside his window and the arrival of guards at his cell door. The discipline continues, one of them said. The Queen waits. They walked him through palace corridors that seemed endless. Everywhere he looked, he saw wealth beyond imagination, paintings that moved, statues that breathed, fountains of light instead of water. This was what 12,000 years of empire building looked like. Humanity had achieved a lot in their short time among the stars, but they had nothing like this. The throne room was just as overwhelming the second time. The same black pillars, the same floating displays, the same galleries full of nobles eager for entertainment. But something was different today. The crowd was larger. The recording drones were more numerous. Word had spread about yesterday's strange session, and everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Queen sat on her crystal throne, which glowed a neutral blue today. She watched Wu approach with an expression he could not read, not angry, not pleased, just interested. They forced him to his knees in the same spot as yesterday. The chains on his wrists felt heavier somehow. The discipline continues, announced. Yesterday we discussed humanity's obvious weaknesses. Today we will discuss your personal failings. She stood and descended from the throne just as she had yesterday. The crowd murmured with anticipation. This was unusual. 2 days of personal attention from the Queen was almost unheard of. Circled him slowly, her 4 arms clasped behind her back. Your file is interesting, Wu, born on Earth, raised in a city called Seoul, trained as an engineer. You have worked on cargo ships for 7 years, no family to speak of, no children, no great achievements, a small life lived in small ways. Most lives are small, Wu said. That doesn't make them worthless. Does it not? You have no legacy, no impact on your species or any other. When you die, and you will die soon by our standards, what will remain? Hopefully some good memories in people who knew me. Maybe a few fixed engines that keep working a little longer than expected. Maybe a kid who remembers a stranger who was kind to her once. Stopped in front of him, the child with the toy. Yes. You keep returning to that moment. Why? Wu thought about it. Because it matters. Small kindnesses matter. I might not change the galaxy. I might not build empires or conquer worlds or live for 800 years, but I can be kind. I can help when help is possible. That's something. That's not nothing. The Queen was silent. Her golden eyes studied him with an intensity that made him want to look away. He did not look away. You do not fear me, she said. It was not a question. I'm terrified of you, Wu admitted. But fear doesn't help anything. It just makes you stupid and slow, so I try not to let it control me. And how does one learn to do that? Practice, I guess. Experience. Humans spend our whole short lives facing things bigger and stronger than us. If we let fear win every time, we'd never do anything. Knelt down again, bringing her face level with his. She was close enough that he could see his own reflection in her golden eyes. He looked tired. He probably needed a shave. Not exactly the heroic figure stories were made of. Your heart rate increased when I came close, she observed. But you did not flinch. Your pupils dilated, fear response. But you did not look away. Most beings look away. Most beings aren't me. No, they are not. She tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle she could not solve. Why did you step in front of the old man, on your ship, the moment that started all of this? Why did you do it? Because someone was hurting someone who couldn't defend themselves. That's wrong. It's always wrong. It doesn't matter who's doing it or why. Even if stepping forward meant your death. Even then, some things matter more than survival. If I let someone get hurt when I could stop it, just to save myself, I wouldn't be able to live with myself anyway. What's the point of surviving if you lose who you are? Was silent for a long moment. The throne room held its breath. Even the recording drones seemed to hover closer, not wanting to miss anything. You are engaged, the Queen said suddenly, changing direction. To the medic on your ship. The question caught him off guard. Yes, Min. How long have you been together? We've been friends for 5 years. The engagement is, he hesitated. This was dangerous ground. If they found out the engagement was fake, he did not know what would happen. Recent. Do you love her? Yes, she's my best friend, she's family. Stood encircled him one more time. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like a predator deciding whether to strike. The throne room was so quiet that Wu could hear his own heartbeat echoing off the stone walls. She stopped directly in front of him. For a moment she just stood there, looking down at him, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned down, bringing her face close to his. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. Quiet, but not quiet enough. In the perfect acoustics of the throne room, every word carried clearly to every ear. Pity, she said. If you were single, I would give you my number. Time stopped. The throne room erupted into chaos. Nobles screamed. Several of them actually fainted, their bodies crumpling to the floor. Commander, standing near the throne, dropped her with a clatter that echoed like a gunshot. Guards looked at each other in confusion, not sure if they were supposed to arrest someone or protect someone or run away. Wu's brain tried to process what had just happened. The queen of the empire, ruler of 100 star systems, commander of the most powerful military force in the galaxy, had just hit on him, while disciplining him, in front of her entire court. His mouth moved before his brain could catch up. Bold of you to assume I'd call. The chaos somehow got louder. More nobles fainted. Commander put her face in her hands. A recording drone crashed into a pillar, apparently overwhelmed by what it was witnessing. And Queen laughed. It was a real laugh, not a polite court chuckle or a threatening villain cackle. It was the genuine, surprised laugh of someone who had not expected to laugh and could not stop themselves. The sound filled the throne room like music, like thunder, like something that had been locked away for a very long time and was finally free. You are impossible, she said, still laughing. Absolutely impossible. I've been told that before. She straightened up, composing herself with visible effort. Her golden eyes still sparkled with amusement. The discipline is concluded. The prisoner will be held under house arrest in the palace while I decide his fate. This session is ended. She turned and swept toward the door behind her throne. Just before she disappeared, she looked back over her shoulder at him. We will speak again, Wu, soon. Then she was gone. The guards came to take Wu away, but they handled him differently now, more carefully, more respectfully, like they were not sure if they were escorting a prisoner or a guest. Commander caught up with them in the corridor. Do you understand what you have done? She asked. Her voice was tight with stress. The political implications alone will take years to sort out. Every noble house in the empire will be in an uproar. Diplomats from a dozen species will demand explanations. You have single-handedly created a crisis. Wu considered this. On the positive side, I'm not dead. Yet you are not dead yet, Commander rubbed her temples. The Queen has not shown interest in anyone in over a century. Her advisors have begged her to consider political marriages. She has refused them all. And now a human, a prisoner, a cargo ship engineer. Is that bad? Bad laughed, but there was no humor in it. It is chaos, complete, absolute chaos. She walked away, muttering to herself about paperwork and diplomatic incidents, and why she had ever taken this job. The guards led Wu to his new quarters. They were not a cell. They were rooms, plural, with furniture and windows and a bathroom with actual hot water. Still guarded, still locked, but considerably nicer than anything he had experienced since his arrest. He sat on the edge of the bed, which was softer than any bed he had ever owned, and tried to understand what had happened. The Queen of the Empire had flirted with him, and he had flirted back. What, he said to the empty room, is happening to my life? Outside his window, ships flew between towers, lights twinkled in alien patterns, and 3 moons rose slowly over a city that was busier than usual tonight. Everyone was talking. Everyone was sharing videos. Everyone was trying to understand. Somewhere in the palace, Wu was fairly certain the most powerful woman in the galaxy was thinking about him. He had no idea what to do with that information. So he lay back on the soft bed, stared at the alien ceiling, and wondered if things could possibly get any stranger. They could. They absolutely could. The video spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within 1 hour, it had been viewed by every with access to the network. Within 6 hours, it had reached the borders of every known civilization. Within 12 hours, it had been translated into 47 languages and was being discussed on news programs from Earth to the far edges of explored space. If you were single, I would give you my number. Bold of you to assume I'd call. The words played on repeat. Analysts debated their meaning. Comedians made jokes. Politicians demanded statements. Ordinary people simply watched in stunned disbelief as the most powerful monarch in the galaxy flirted with a human prisoner. On Earth, the coalition government held emergency meetings. They did not know whether to court-martial Wu for causing a diplomatic incident or award him a medal for somehow making humanity interesting to the. Several generals suggested both options. Several politicians suggested waiting to see what happened next. One senator suggested pretending the whole thing never happened, which everyone agreed was the worst suggestion, but also the most tempting. Min watched the video 17 times in a row. She was sitting in a small room on the, technically a diplomatic guest but really a polite prisoner. They had brought her here 3 days after Wu's arrest, explaining that as his registered partner, she had certain rights of proximity. She was not allowed to see him yet, but she was close. That was something. "You absolute idiot," she said to the screen, watching Wu's face as he delivered his line. "You beautiful, stupid, impossible idiot." She had known him for 5 years. She had seen him do brave things, reckless things, kind things, and occasionally stupid things. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. He had somehow made the queen of the empire laugh. Actually laugh. The woman who had not smiled in public for a century. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She turned off the screen and said, "Come in." Commander entered. The tall woman looked even more exhausted than she had in the throne room video. Dark circles had formed under her golden eyes, and her uniform was slightly wrinkled, which Min suspected was deeply unusual for her. Ms. Lee said, "May I sit?" "Of course." Sat heavily in a chair that was slightly too small for her. "I need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Wu." Min kept her face neutral. "Of course, what would you like to know?" "How did you meet?" "We were assigned to the same ship 5 years ago. He was the engineer, I was the medic. We became friends." "And when did you become engaged?" Min had prepared for this question. "About 2 years ago. It was a quiet thing. We're not very traditional." "I see," leaned forward. "Ms. Lee, I must be direct with you. The Queen has taken an interest in your partner. This is unprecedented. In over a century of rule, she has never shown personal interest in anyone. Now she demands daily meetings with a human prisoner. The political implications are enormous." "What kind of implications?" "The kind that could start wars or prevent them. The kind that could reshape alliances across the galaxy. The kind that have every noble house in the Empire sending me urgent messages demanding to know what is happening." Rubbed her temples. "Several houses have already suggested that the human should be removed permanently before the situation becomes more complicated." Min felt cold. Removed. Assassination is a traditional solution to inconvenient complications in politics. However, the Queen has made it clear that any harm to your partner will be treated as a personal attack on her authority. This has prevented action so far, but it has also intensified interest. Interest from who? Everyone, but particularly Lord of House Dorian. He has sought the Queen's favor for decades. He is not pleased to see a human receive attention that he has been. Min filed away that name for later. What do you want from me, Commander? Hesitated. I want to understand. In my experience, humans are straightforward creatures, simple motivations, simple desires, but your partner is not simple. He does not act as he should. He does not fear as he should. The Queen is fascinated by him, and I need to understand why. Wu is exactly what he appears to be, Min said. He's stubborn, he's brave. He does the right thing even when it costs him. That's not complicated, it's just rare. Among your kind. Among any kind. Was silent for a moment. The Queen will see him again today. Another private interview. There have been 5 already. What do they talk about? Everything, nothing. She asks him questions about humanity. He answers honestly. Sometimes he makes her laugh. It is disconcerting. Min smiled despite herself. That sounds like Wu. Indeed, stood. Ms. Li, I have one more question. Your engagement to Wu, is it genuine? The question hung in the air. Min met's golden eyes and held them. He's my family, she said. The only family that matters. Studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded and left without another word. Min waited until the door closed. Then she let out a long breath. The engagement was fake. It had always been fake. A convenience for paperwork and bureaucracy and nothing more. She and Wu were friends, close as siblings, but never romantic. They had laughed about it often enough over drinks. Who would ever believe they were actually together? But now that fake engagement was the only thing keeping Wu alive. If the nobles discovered it was a lie, they would have grounds to challenge him. Something about courting rights, Min guessed. Some traditional law that allowed rivals to fight for access to someone of interest. Wu would be forced to fight against warriors who had centuries of combat training. He would die. She needed to talk to him. She needed to warn him. She needed to figure out how to navigate this impossible situation. 2 hours later, she got her wish. Guards escorted her through the palace to a garden she had not seen before. It was beautiful, full of alien flowers and strange trees with leaves that chimed like bells in the wind. And there, sitting on a bench beneath a tree that glowed faintly purple, was Wu. He looked tired, he had lost weight, but when he saw her, his face lit up with genuine joy. Min! She sat beside him and punched him in the arm. Al, what was that for? For being an idiot, for causing an interstellar incident, for flirting with the alien queen while in chains. In my defense, she started it. That's not a defense, that's an escalation. Wu laughed. It was good to hear him laugh. I missed you too. They sat in silence for a moment, looking at the strange flowers, listening to the chiming leaves. A guard stood at a respectful distance, close enough to watch, far enough to give them privacy. We need to talk about the engagement, Min said quietly. Wu's smile faded. I figured what's wrong. It's the only thing keeping you alive right now. If anyone discovers it's fake, you'll have to fight duels. Lots of duels. Against nobles who want the queen's attention. Duels, like actual fighting duels. To the death, apparently, it's traditional. That's the worst tradition I've ever heard of. Welcome to politics. Min took his hand, which she had done 1,000 times before, but this time she was aware of the guard watching. The performance mattered now. We need to keep up the act, perfectly, no mistakes. Wu nodded slowly. Okay, but Min, what if I don't want to keep up the act forever? She looked at him sharply. What do you mean? The queen, we've talked a lot over the past few days. She's not what I expected. She's lonely. She's curious. She's been ruling for so long that she's forgotten what it's like to just talk to someone without politics getting in the way. He paused. I like her. You like her? I know it's insane, I know it doesn't make sense, but yes, I like her. Min stared at him for a long moment, then she started laughing. What's so funny? Your entire life is a drama now, Wu. You're fake engaged to avoid being murdered by aliens who want to date the woman who's kind of flirting with you. And you're telling me you actually like her. When you put it that way, it sounds complicated. It is complicated. It's the most complicated situation anyone has ever been in. Wu sighed. I know, but I can't help how I feel, and I can't lie to her. She'd see through it anyway. She sees through everything. Min squeezed his hand. Then we figure it out together, like we always do. Are you angry? No, I'm terrified. There's a difference. She smiled at him, and this time it was real. Just try not to start any wars, okay? I don't have the paperwork for that. The guard approached. Your time is up. The prisoner must return to his quarters. Wu stood. I'm apparently a person of interest to the crown now. Does that come with better meals? The guard blinked, confused by the question. Min shook her head and smiled. Same old Wu. Always. They took him away. Min watched him go, her smile fading slowly. She had work to do. Research into law. Research into this lord who wanted Wu dead. Research into how to keep her best friend alive in a palace full of people who wanted him gone. The drama was just beginning. And somewhere in the palace, Queen sat alone in her chambers, watching a recording of a human and his friend in the garden. She watched how they talked, how they laughed, how comfortable they were with each other. She watched, and she wondered, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She was not sure yet what to call it. But she was determined to find out. Lord of House Dorian was the kind of person who had never heard the word no in his entire 300 years of life. He was tall, even for a, with skin so deep purple it was almost black and golden eyes that burned with ambition. His family controlled mining operations across 30 planets. His personal fortune could buy small moons. His combat skills had won him championships in the Imperial Games for 6 consecutive decades. And he had wanted Queen since the moment he first saw her, 2 centuries ago. He had been patient, he had been proper, he had sent gifts and made proposals and waded through her rejections with the confidence of someone who knew that eventually time would favor him. No one else was worthy, no one else was powerful enough. Eventually she would see. And now a human, a small, fragile, insignificant human had done what never could. He had made her laugh. He had made her interested. He had made her step down from her throne. This could not stand. Spent 2 weeks investigating. He was thorough. He was methodical. He had resources that most nobles could only dream of. And eventually he found what he was looking for. The engagement was fake. The medical records did not match. The communication histories did not align. The body language in the garden was wrong. Friends, certainly, close friends, but not lovers, not betrothed. It was a fraud. Traditional law was clear on this matter. When the Queen showed interest in someone attached, that attachment protected them from challenge. But a false attachment was a crime, and crimes could be punished. Lord smiled in his private chambers and began drafting the documents. Wu was eating breakfast when the guards came. This was not unusual. Guards came for him every day now, escorting him to meetings with or interviews with officials or diplomatic sessions where he sat in a corner and tried not to cause additional incidents. But these guards were different. They wore ceremonial armor instead of practical equipment. They carried formal staffs instead of weapons, and their faces showed no emotion at all. Wu, the lead guard announced, you are formally summoned to answer a challenge. Wu put down his spoon. A challenge? What kind of challenge? Lord of House Dorian has discovered that your betrothal is fraudulent. Under traditional law, this grants him the right to challenge you for access to the Queen's attention. The challenge is formal combat. To the death. The words hit Wu like physical blows. fraudulent, challenge, death. And if I refuse? Refusal admits cowardice. You would lose all standing. The queen would be forced by law to distance herself from you. You would be returned to general imprisonment and likely executed for your original crimes. So there was no real choice. Fight and probably die, or refuse and definitely die. Wonderful. When is this challenge? Tomorrow, the grand arena. The entire empire will watch. Of course they will. Wu laughed, though there was no humor in it. Can I at least finish my breakfast first? The guard blinked, clearly not expecting this response. You may have 1 hour to prepare. They took him not to his usual quarters but to a smaller room, barely more than a closet, with a simple bed and no windows. A holding cell for challengers. He sat on the bed and tried to think. He was going to fight a lord, a warrior who had trained for centuries. Someone twice his size, with natural strength and speed that humans could not match, in a public arena with the whole galaxy watching. He was going to die. The door opened. Commander entered. You have a visitor, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I could not stop her. She stepped aside, and Queen entered the small room. She had to duck to fit through the doorway. The room was not designed for someone her height. She looked out of place here, like a goddess visiting a prison cell. Her forearms were clasped behind her back, and her golden eyes fixed on Wu with an intensity that made his breath catch. Closed the door behind her. They were alone. I can stop this, said, no greeting, no small talk, just the words. I have the authority. I can declare the challenge invalid. I can banish from court. I can protect you. Wu stood up slowly. And what happens then? What do you mean? If you save me, what happens to everything we've talked about? What happens to your position, your authority? How will it look to your empire if you break your own laws to protect a human? Was silent, her jaw tightened. I have thought about that. And I do not care. Yes, you do. You care about your people. You care about your empire. You care about the stability you've spent 300 years building. If you protect me like this, you undermine everything. You will die. Maybe. Wu stepped closer to her. In this small room, there was not much distance between them. But if I hide behind you, everything I've said about humans was just talk. All those conversations we had about human courage, human stubbornness, human will. None of it means anything if I run from this. This is not running, this is survival. Is it? Or is it giving up who I am to stay alive a little longer? He looked up at her. She was so much taller than him, so much stronger. And yet right now she looked almost fragile. I have to do this. I have to show them what we are. And what are humans? Wu smiled, though it was a sad smile. Stubborn, probably too stubborn, but we don't quit, we don't break. No matter how big the enemy is, no matter how impossible the odds, we keep standing up. That's who we are. That's what I need to show them. Was silent for a long moment. Her golden eyes searched his face, looking for something. Fear, maybe, or doubt. She found neither. You are a fool, she said finally. I know. You will likely die tomorrow. I know that too. And you are still going to do this. Yes. She moved closer. Her hand reached out and touched his face. Her skin was cool and smooth like polished stone. Her touch was gentle, impossibly gentle for someone so powerful. I have ruled for 300 years, she said softly. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have commanded fleets and destroyed enemies and shaped the destiny of 100 worlds. In all that time, I have never met anyone like you. Is that good or bad? I do not know yet. She leaned down, bringing her face close to his. Their eyes met. Try not to die, Wu. I have not given you my number yet. He laughed. He could not help it. Even here, even now, she could make him laugh. I'll do my best. She straightened and stepped back. The moment was over. She was the queen again, formal and composed. The grand arena opens at sunset tomorrow. Lord has chosen traditional weapons, energy blades. You may select any weapon you wish. I don't know how to use weapons. Then use human weapons, or use none. The choice is yours. None, then. I don't think a weapon is going to save me. What will save you? Wu thought about it. Honestly, I have no idea, but I'll figure something out. I always do. Looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and left without another word. The door closed behind her. The room felt smaller and emptier than before. Wu sat back down on the bed. Tomorrow he would face a warrior who had spent centuries learning to kill. He had no weapons, no training, no real plan. The odds were impossible. But he thought about Park, the old man he had protected on the ship. He thought about the little girl and her toy. He thought about Min, who was somewhere in this palace worrying about him. He thought about all the humans across the galaxy who would see this fight and judge humanity by what he did. No pressure. He lay down on the narrow bed and closed his eyes. Tomorrow he would show the galaxy what a human could do. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. He slept eventually. His dreams were strange and full of fire, and 3 moons rising over an arena where the whole universe was watching. When he woke, it was time. The grand arena was older than human civilization. Its stone walls had witnessed 10,000 battles, 100,000 deaths, and moments of glory and shame that had shaped the course of history. It was vast, large enough to hold 200,000 spectators in rising rows of seats that climbed toward the sky like the steps of giants. Tonight, every seat was full. They had come from across the empire and beyond, nobles in their finest robes, common citizens who had won lottery tickets for the public sections, diplomats from a dozen species, including a small group of humans from the Earth Coalition who sat in stunned silence, still unsure how one cargo ship engineer had caused all of this. Billions more watched on screens across the galaxy. The 3 moons hung in the sky above the open arena, casting silver light over the sand-covered floor. The air was cold and thin, and carried the distant sounds of the crowd, a murmur of anticipation that sounded like the ocean before a storm. Min sat in a box near the front, surrounded by guards who were technically there to protect her, but also very clearly there to prevent her from doing anything foolish. She watched the empty arena floor and tried to breathe normally. She had done everything she could. She had researched combat traditions. She had studied Lord's previous fights. She had even managed to send a message to Wu with advice, though she doubted it would help much. Advice did not matter when you were facing a warrior with 3 centuries of training. A horn sounded, deep and resonant, echoing off the ancient stones. Lord entered first. He was magnificent in a terrible way. His armor was black and red, custom fitted to his massive frame, covered in the symbols of his house and the marks of his victories. 2 energy blades hung at his sides, their edges humming with barely contained power. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never lost, never feared, never doubted. The crowd cheered. He was one of them, a champion, a lord, a proper warrior. He reached the center of the arena and turned to face the opposite gate. He drew his blades. The energy fields flared to life, casting red light across the sand. A second horn sounded. Wu entered. The contrast was almost painful. Where was tall, Wu was small. Where was armored, Wu wore simple clothes, the same clothes he had been arrested in, now clean but still clearly basic. Where carried weapons that could cut through steel, Wu carried nothing. He walked slowly toward the center of the arena. His face was calm. His hands hung loose at his sides. He looked around at the massive crowd, at the ancient walls, at the 3 moons above, and he smiled. Not a brave smile, not a confident smile, just a genuine smile, as if he was taking a moment to appreciate the view before what came next. The murmur of the crowd shifted. Some laughed, some him, some simply stared in disbelief. Wu stopped 10 feet from. "You come without weapons," said. His voice was deep and filled with contempt. "Is this surrender?" "No, this is me." "A fool's choice. You could have had a blade at least, a fighting chance." "I don't know how to use your weapons. Bringing one would just be pretending to be something I'm not." Laughed. "Then what are you, human?" Wu looked up at him. "I'm stubborn." The final horn sounded. The fight began. Moved like lightning. His blade swept toward Wu in an arc that would have cut him in half if it had connected. But Wu was already moving, diving to the side, rolling across the sand, coming up running. He had no hope of matching strength or speed. He knew that, everyone knew that. So he did not try, he ran, he dodged. He used every inch of the arena, every pillar, every shadow. He made chase him. The crowd watched in confusion. This was not fighting. This was survival. But somehow, minute after minute, Wu kept surviving. Was getting angry. His swings became wilder, more aggressive. He was faster than Wu, but Wu was more unpredictable. He changed direction suddenly. He used the environment. He threw sand in his face. He grabbed a piece of broken pillar and used it to block a blow that should have killed him, the energy blade cutting through the stone but giving him a precious second to escape. Blood appeared on Wu's arm where a blade had gotten too close, then his leg, then his side. He was being cut apart slowly, piece by piece, but he kept moving, he kept fighting. He would not fall. In her box, Min was crying. She did not know when she had started. On her crystal throne above the arena, Queen watched with hands gripping the armrests so tightly that the living crystal cracked beneath her fingers. 15 minutes passed, 20. Wu was covered in blood now, most of it his own. He was limping. His breath came in ragged gasps, but his eyes were still clear, still focused. Stood in the center of the arena, barely breathing hard. "Why do you not fall?" he demanded. "You are dying, your body is failing. Any sensible creature would have surrendered by now." Wu straightened up as best he could. His legs shook, his hands trembled. "Because giving up isn't who I am." "What is the point? You cannot win, you must know that." "Winning isn't the point." Wu took a step forward, then another, walking toward despite everything. "The point is standing up. The point is showing everyone watching that humans don't break. No matter how big the enemy, no matter how impossible the odds, we don't break." Foolishness, pride, weakness disguised as strength. "Maybe," Wu smiled through blood and exhaustion, "but it's our foolishness, our pride, and it's kept us going for 200,000 years. We survived ice ages, we survived plagues, we survived ourselves. We'll survive this too." He reached, standing directly in front of him, looking up at the massive warrior who had every advantage. Raised his blade. And Wu moved. Not back, not away, forward, into the strike. He let the blade cut into his shoulder, let the pain flood through him, let his body take the damage it was going to take anyway. But in exchange, he got inside's guard. He got close enough to touch. His hands found his wrists. He twisted. He used leverage, body mechanics, techniques that humans had developed over of fighting things bigger than themselves. His grip shifted. One blade fell. Wu caught it. It felt wrong in his hand, heavy, unbalanced. He had never used anything like it, but he did not need to use it well. He just needed to use it once. He brought the blade up. The energy edge hummed against throat. The arena went silent. 200,000 held their breath. Billions across the galaxy stared at their screens. A human, beaten and bloody and barely standing, had somehow disarmed a champion. His golden eyes were wide with shock, with fear, with something that might have been respect. "Yield," Wu said. His voice was hoarse but steady. "I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to show you we don't break." For a long moment nothing happened. The blade hummed. The crowd waited. Then Lord of House Dorian, champion of the Imperial Games, Lord of 30 planets, did something he had never done in 300 years. He knelt. "I yield." The words echoed across the arena. The silence lasted for one more heartbeat. Then the crowd erupted. It was not all cheers. Some were angry. Some were confused. Some refused to believe what they had seen. But many were cheering, a roar of sound that shook the ancient stones, that carried up to the 3 moons, that spread across the galaxy on waves of light. A human had won. Wu dropped the blade. His legs finally gave out and he collapsed to his knees in the sand. Blood pooled beneath him. His vision swam. He was fairly certain he was dying. But he was smiling. Movement above him, a shadow blocking the moonlight. He looked up and saw Queen descending from her throne, walking across the arena floor, her robes trailing through the sand. She had left her seat, in front of her entire empire, for him. She knelt beside him. "You impossible creature," she said softly. "I told you not to die." "Haven't died yet." "You are very close." "Then you should probably get me to a doctor." He coughed, and there was blood in it, or whatever you call them here. Reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool against his. Her golden eyes were bright with something that looked like tears, though he was not sure could cry. "Medical teams are coming," she said. "You will survive this." "Promise." "I am the Queen. When I say something will happen, it happens." Around them, the crowd was still roaring. Recording drones swarmed overhead. Commander was shouting orders to clear a path. Min was fighting through the crowd, trying to reach the arena floor. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Just the 2 of them, kneeling in the sand, holding hands while 3 moons watched from above. "I believe," said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence that fell when the crowd saw her speak. "We have much to discuss. Perhaps over dinner. I will send you my number." Wu laughed. It hurt to laugh, everything hurt, but he laughed anyway. "Took you long enough." She smiled. The Queen of the Empire, ruler of 100 star systems, smiled like a woman who had finally found something she had been looking for a very long time. Medical teams arrived. They lifted Wu onto a floating stretcher. Min pushed through and grabbed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "You idiot," she said. "You beautiful, stupid, wonderful idiot." "Did we win?" "You won somehow, against all odds," she laughed through her tears. "I'm going to kill you myself when you're healed." "Fair enough." They carried him away. The crowd parted. The cheers followed him out of the arena and into the medical center, where doctors who had studied medicine for centuries scrambled to figure out how to save a small, fragile human who should have died a dozen times over. He survived. Of course he survived. He was too stubborn to die. 3 days later, when he was finally conscious and coherent, he found a message waiting for him. A communication code. A number. The Queen's personal contact information. He stared at it for a long time. Then he started typing. In the royal chambers, Queen's personal communicator chimed. She looked at the message. 2 words. "You called." She laughed. She laughed until Commander came to check on her, worried that something was wrong, but nothing was wrong. For the first time in a very long time, everything felt exactly right. Somewhere in the palace, Min was filling out paperwork. Legal documents to formally end a fake engagement, diplomatic forms to establish a new kind of relationship between species, insurance papers for all the property damage the duel had caused. She sighed, smiled, and kept writing. The universe had changed. History had pivoted, and it had all started with one stubborn human who refused to let an old man get pushed around. That was humanity's answer to the galaxy. Not strength, not technology, not power. Just stubbornness, kindness, and the courage to stand up no matter what. The stars seemed brighter that night, or maybe that was just how it felt. Either way, it was a good beginning.